Hello and welcome. My name is Stacy. This is Flionfree Fibers, and today we're going to talk about warping your mini loom, how to get started, and how to also pull off your finished pieces. So there's a couple ways to warp your mini loom. You can warp it like this, where you tie it on and you wrap around each tooth, and your back will look like this. There's two different ways to weave these warps. So that is the first option. And the second option is like how this one is warped, where you tie it on and you actually wrap around each tooth and completely around the loom. So back here I have what looks like a blank canvas, but we're actually going to cut across here and tie fringes on this option. So there's two ways to get started. You do want to keep them tight, so this one's not all the way on there, but we're going to go about getting started with our mini loom. So for this, you want to thread your needle. Now you have two needles with your mini loom. You have one that is a bit more pointy and one that's a little duller. It really is preference is all I have found. I like the pointier one. You also have your beater comb. I tend to start weaving I'm right-handed from the right. But what you want to do to get started is actually start from your opposite side. So I'm going to go over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And I'm going to pull that almost like about halfway. And instead of going above that and working on my next row, I'm actually going to go underneath. And this is going to be my initial row. So I make all of my mini loom projects out of scraps. So you'll see I have scraps from spinning and just playing with stuff and samples that I've done, project scraps, and then these are actually scraps from my projects on my larger loom. So we consider this loom waste, and a lot of people throw these away, but I tend to keep them all and use them for several different things, which they're great for mini looms. So what we're going to do now is actually beat this down and get our first row in. So what this has done is this has locked that yarn in place, so we don't have an end to worry about. Now we go about weaving our second row. And when you weave, you want to hold on to this end. You don't want to pull that in too tight. So we're going to pull that out. And what we're going to do is leave a little angle. That is going to give us enough slack so that doesn't pull in. This is considered your salvager ends. And see how nice and even this is right now, that salvage line. If you end up pulling too tight, this is what happens. You start off the width of your little loom, and as you keep pulling in through the middle, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. So I did this example to show how pulling that in is going to affect your end piece. All right. So, and it's okay, it's still completely workable, but just so you know, when it comes off, that's what it's going to end up looking like. So one more thing I want to show you before we go into pulling off our projects is how to change to the next piece of yarn. You're going to find if you use long pieces of yarn to warp with, it's a lot of pulling back and forth through. So you can double up. I find that gets a little bit difficult as for beginners if you have running double threads and then you're having to cut it off, and I will show that. So I left it a little bit. I had my angle. I'm beating that down. And don't worry about these. As you can see, I have plenty of these over here. We're going to snip those off. Those are where I've changed. Now I have enough right now to go back, but that's going to leave me a very short piece to overlap, and we want to overlap by about 1 inch. So what I'm going to do, and it's okay if you get to here and it kind of comes off, let it fall off. You're going to go over, under, over, under, over. Under. I am going to thread that. Through. And I'm actually going to grab my next piece and thread it through as well. Now, if you're looking to have your color changes kind of go in a nice change, we are on white right now, so you would think you want to thread the white because that's the color you're on, but you actually want to thread the change color because you're pulling to this end, so that's going to be where they come together. I'm going to thread that one as well. I'm going to hold this down. Pull this out a little bit. Ooh. When I pull this through, I'm going to have these overlap a bit. So I don't want to leave this one sticking out, so I'm going to pull this out here. So I'm going to have this little extra piece. I try to use as much as possible of my scraps, but I want it to overlap by about 1 inch, so I don't need that to be. So there's my overlap and lock in. There. Oops. And the whites match up. And now we lock that in. Under, over. And it's that simple. So there's no knots in weaving other than your fringe if that's how you want to end your piece. We just kind of overlap things. And if it does get too tight, so say I did that and I'm like, oh no, too tight. It's no big deal. We'll go down, pull that out. I'm going to loosen that up a bit so you can pull it up to loosen it. Pull that back out. Give myself some space. Hold that here. Pull it down. And now here we go. And now it's nice and loose. And see, you can see this one's already starting to come in a little bit. It's actually because it's loose too. I didn't tie it all the way. I want to try and keep it like this. So you see it still came in a little bit on this end. It's going to happen. This won't be so visible. And these are loose so that I will be able to adjust that when that comes off. So that's how you get started and how you change yarns. So I'm going to put this one aside for now. And we are going to talk. So this one I'm going to say it's done. And this is the one where we warped through the back. Now when I started with this one, because it is a long one, I put some toilet paper in the bottom. This I like to use toilet paper. Some people use popsicle sticks. But this is going to hold this on it's going to hold my weft on, which is your across, the long way is your warp. It's going to hold that in place while I tie the fringes. So I'm going to clean this up first. So I don't cut these until the end. That way I don't worry about cutting my warp strings. And I just kind of come through with little snippers. Snip the pieces off. Snip them off, get a little haircut. Snip. Be careful not to snip your other strings. There we go. And there may be a few on the back. I may need to still go in there and snip these up a little more. What I will do is get this off, let it adjust a bit. So here we are in the back. What I'm going to do is, start with scissors, go through, pick it up, go through, and I'm going to cut it straight down the middle. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to see what I have for a thread count on my warps. I'll take this out of its hole here. I believe there's 21. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 21. So I'm going to do them in, I'm going to tie them in multiples of 3. So all you're going to do is take, and this gives you enough of a fringe to be able to tie your ends. And I am just bringing that down to the end, and there it is. So slowly bring that down, and there it is. And I'm going to continue that all the way across and lock my work in place. Now on this side I will do the same thing, but what I'll do when I get to this side, let me just lock this end in. 1, 2, 3. And get those through. Most of those are in. I'll worry about that in a minute. So I'm going to come to this side, and all I'm going to do is pull the toilet paper out and do the same thing I did on the last side. I've got the same amount of warps, threads. I'm going to tie them in multiples of 3, and then I will have my fringe. Now, you can, after you've knot this, if you don't want a long fringe, you can trim that up so you have like little short fringes in there. At which point here I would, right now I can manipulate this, stretch it out, even out my threads, but it's all in place, and there we go. The last thing you want to do is you do, a lot of people wet finish it. You just soak it for a little bit and then let it dry. This is all cotton, so wash it, dry it, it should be fine. It will shrink, it's cotton, but it is all cotton. So that's how you remove that one. Now for this one, if you warp it this way, where you're just going over the teeth every other, you're going to want to, you don't put the toilet paper in the bottom. I still start the same way. I'm up in here working in my easy area, and as I get a chunk, then I push it down, and I pack it down pretty well. So it's pushed right up against here. Now, as you get up here, I actually switched to a tapestry needle, and I was doing this double. So this is some experimental spinning yarn that I had, that I was playing with different spinning techniques, and I thread this through and I was working it double. Now this looks like it's packed real well, and you can pack with this quite well, but what I wanted to show was you really want to get this packed. So pull those down, pack that in, because what's happening when we get to the end of this, and we're going to try and get this as close to here as possible, is we're just pulling it off. So for that to be tight enough to just be able to pull that off and end like this, where it's looped over itself, you want to be able, you want enough on here so that it's not too loose. So you want to pack it in as much as you can. Then when we pull this off, you can kind of spread it out and it will turn out just fine. So I'm going to finish this up, and then we'll pull this off. Now, if you do get a tapestry needle, because I do this quite often where I use this method, I would suggest a longer one. You're going to want one the length of your loom, kind of like the length of these, because you want to be able to get it all the way through. Otherwise, I'll show you what how I have to play with this. So I pull it through. It's getting quite tight at this point, so I would probably start with the other method if you're new. Pull that through. So now I only have a half, and then I continue on the rest of the way and pull that through. Now, working with the double yarn, which is not suggest for beginners, it makes the ends a little more difficult. You can see some of these are puffy. That's all going to work out. But sometimes you have one thread that's like hanging in a little bit longer than the other. It's a lot of fidgety. So if that stuff's going to bother you, having fidgetiness and things not completely even, I definitely wouldn't start with the double. You can hear it coming through that it's getting tight in there as we're getting to the end of the loom. And I have to figure out which one I need to tighten. There's that one. There it is. Stand it up, pull it down. And it really does get tight up in here. And you're going to find these are two totally different yarn fiber makeups. So just know some yarns are going to stick. This warp is still cotton. You do want a warp that's strong enough, and you're not pulling on this like you would a floor loom or a rigid heddle loom where there's a lot of tension and you're cranking it, but it will still get some strength. So you don't want a thread that's going to snap when you're doing this. You know, it gets tight. It's much nicer if you have a longer needle. I'm going to end with this one. It may be a little loose, but that's not bad. See what I did here? I did the same exact. I don't know what I did. Don't be afraid to pull back. Okay. I missed one. And you can skip some. You like if you want to skip every other. So we're going every other one, but you can say I'm going to do 2. So I'm going to go over 2, under 2. That's completely fine. You can do all sorts of designs like that. A little more advanced, but we just call in weaving we call those floats. And you can do designs with those. You can change from a plain weave, what we're doing here, to have some floats to add some interest and go back to a plain weave. That's what I tend to like to do if I'm putting floats in. I like to kind of lock them in with plain weave sections. But you don't have to. All right, so let's say we're ending there. I have these two ends that aren't locked in. What I want to do, I'm going to have to cut this off. I definitely prefer not having knots at all. I am not good with them. So we are going to undo this. So this one doesn't have, if I pull that just off, it's going to be loose. So what I'm going to do is actually put this through my needle and run this through my threads as I pull it off. Push these down a little bit. So I don't want to run it right through the next one. I want to go skip one. I'm going to put it under there, and I'm going to pop it off. So skip one, we're going on to the second one. Pull it through and pop it off. So going here, basically going to the thread we can see, pulling it through, and then popping it off. Sorry if that's really loud, that's scratching against there. Oh, I don't want to get my weft thread, which I am. A little bit's fine, I don't want a big chunk of it. So I've pulled that through, and I'm going to pop it off. So don't pull it too hard because you're going to pull this in. Oops, this is how I do it, and it locks it in place quite well. So you did pack it in, so you're going to have to pull it down a little bit to get these off. Pop it off. Pull it through. Pop it off. Off, and one more. Pull it through. Pop it off. Maybe. It really likes to hang in there. So I am going to play with that a little bit, get that on the ends. I pulled it a little tight over here. Whew. Loosen that up. Now that's pulled through, and now you can actually I am going to tie off. Oops, missed it there. One more time through. And that end is off. So I'm going to play with things, move it around. Oops, and this end already kind of popped itself off. So all I do on this end, you gotta unknot this. Here. And I'm going to do the same thing we did on the last side. So see, I still have this in here. I know this is holding. I've got plenty of room to work on this. I'm going to run this through. And on this side, I just really have to just run it through. So again, every other one. So that was on this side. I actually have to go this way to wrap that over. So see, I cut this a little short, so and your option here is, if you do find yourself not leaving enough to do that, you can just wrap it over one. Oops. To bring it back over through the front. So just make sure it wraps completely over your last piece of thread or yarn going through, and secure it in place. So that last piece of yarn right here is secured in place. I'm going to finish this off. Locking it to itself. There, and then I'm going to spread these out now. So this was packed down really well. So we can move them up to our end piece, spread it out. You just move a little bit at a time. So this way is quite a bit more advanced as far as, you know, having to fiddle with it than the other way. But there you go. There's my end piece. And then I'll just cut the little frizzies off and ends. But there it is. So there's one option, and here is your tied fringe option, which I will go through and finish tying up. Any questions, comments, please leave them below. Like, subscribe for more tips and tricks to little loom weaving. I will be doing some videos on some tapestry, some hangings, how to do that, different methods of weaving, as well as different methods of finishing Thank you for watching and have a great day.
If you would like to purchase one of my mini looms, you can visit my shop, Flionfree Fibers, on Etsy, or click the direct link in the show notes below.